Okay? Ang i-discuss natin sa video ito ay limit theorems. So these are na-derive lamang from the definition that we had last sessions. So punta tayo sa first theorem. So meron tayong limit ng isang constant. So limit of a constant C as x approaches any number, a will always be equal to a constant. So meaning to say, kahit anong constant yan, kahit 5, kahit 6, kahit 7, as x approaches any number, the answer will always be a constant. So, sample. So if I have here limit of 7 as x approaches 2, the answer will always be that constant. Kasi hindi naman nababago ang constant. So, example number 2, if I have here limit of, say, 8 as x approaches 17,000, so it is still equal to 8. Kasi di ba pagka constant, horizontal line lang yan. So, mapakanan, mapakaliwa, the same lang ang makukuha nating value. How about limit of pi as x approaches negative 82. So, of course, since pi is a constant, ang answer pa rin natin dyan ay pi. So, for number 4, limit of e as x approaches pi. So, the value is e, since e is a constant, which is 2.7182818. So, that is the first theorem. So, for any constant, it will always be a constant as x approaches any number. So, second theorem natin, since limit of f of x as x approaches a is equal to f of a. So, we have discussed this last time, that if and only if limit of f of x as x approaches a minus is the same as limit of f of x as x approaches a plus. So, mangyayari lang to kapag substitute natin kung parehas sila na tinutumbok ang isang value. So let us have, say, limit of x as x approaches 2. So that is simply equal to 2. So you just have to substitute the value of x here dun sa ating limit. Say limit of y as y approaches 7. So this is equal to 7. Limit of x as y approaches 2. So the answer here is x. Since ang variable natin dito is y, so this x is treated constant, babalik tayo dun sa limit of c as x approaches any number will always be a constant. So, limit of, say, z as z approaches 1/2, the answer is 1/2. So, using natin yung 1/2. Z approaches 1/2 is of course equal to 1/2. Since isa-substitute lang natin yung 1/2 dun sa ating z. So that is theorem number 2. So punta tayo sa number 3. So limit of k f of x as x approaches a. So remember na ipa-follow lang natin yung principle kanina, that limit right hand limit must be equal to left hand limit. So meaning to say, ilalabas lang natin yung constant outside and then evaluate the limit. Say, for example, if I have here limit of 7x as x approaches 2, so that is equal to 2, limit of x as x approaches 2. So yung, it should be 7. 7 must be put outside. Since 7 is a constant, ilalabas lang natin siya, then i-evaluate na natin yung limit of x as x approaches 2. But since limit of x as x approaches 2, sa substitute lang natin siya doon, so this gives us 7 times 2. So the answer there is 14. So, that is theorem number 3. So, let's proceed with theorem number 4. So, this theorem is almost the same lang. Limit of sum is the sum of their limits. So, meaning to say, kung difference naman, you just have to change that positive to negative. So, limit of the first term plus limit of the second term. So, kung may third term pa, limit of the third term as x approaches c. So, let us try to have an example. So, if I have here limit of 3x plus 5, we will have here limit of 3x plus limit of 5. So that is your first term, limit of 5 as x approaches, say 0. As x approaches 0, as x approaches 0. So since 3x, 3 is a constant, I can put that outside. So magiging itong 3 limit of x as x approaches 0 plus limit of 5 as x approaches 0. So, gagamitan natin ng theorem number 2 at saka theorem number 1. So, since as x approaches 0 ito, so substitute lang natin sa x yung 0. So, this becomes 0. So, this gives us 0 plus yung 5 natin dito since a constant. So, the answer there is equal to 5. So, another one. So, what if I have here limit of 7x minus 8 as x approaches 3. So what we will do here is to apply this principle, limit of the first term, 7x, as x approaches 3, minus, since naka-minus yan, limit ng second term, which is 8, as x approaches 3. Then we will apply theorem number 3. So, yung constant, ilalabas lang natin. So, 7, limit of x as x approaches 3, minus limit of 8 as x approaches 3. So, but limit of x as x approaches 3 is simply 3. So, substitute lang natin yon. So, magiging 7 times 3 minus 8. And that gives us 21 minus 8. And 21 minus 8 is equal to 13. So therefore, limit of 7x minus 8 as x approaches 3 is equal to 13. So let's proceed with our next theorem. Limit of a product is the product of their limits. Halimbawa, meron akong f of x and another g of x. Kunin ko lang ang limit nung una, tapos yung sagot, i-multiply ko sa limit nung pangalawa. Let's have, say, limit of 2x plus 5 multiplied by 9 minus 2x as x approaches 1. So, kung titingnan natin yung ating function, meron tayong f of x, meron tayong g of x. So, sabi dito, sa theorem na ito, that is equal to limit ng 2x plus 5 as x approaches 1 multiplied by limit of 9 minus 2x as x approaches 1. So, what we will do, i-apply natin yung theorem number 4. Yung limit of sum is the sum of their limits. So, magiging itong limit of 2x as x approaches 7 plus limit of 5 as x approaches, sorry, it's not 7. It's 1 lang pala. So, 1. Multiplied by limit of 9 as x approaches 1 minus limit of 2x as x approaches 1. But then again, gagamit ulit tayo ng theorem number 3. So, lalabas lang natin yun. So, magiging 2 limit of x as x approaches 1 plus limit of 5 as x approaches 1. Pinsin natin siya. And then, multiply natin siya sa limit ng 9 as x approaches 1 minus 2. So, since merong constant doon, ilalabas din siya. Limit of x as x approaches 1. Then, apply na natin. Theorem number 2. So, this is 2 times 1 plus theorem number 1 multiplied by theorem number 1 minus 2 times 1. So if we simplify this, that gives us 2 plus 5 is 7. 9 minus 2 is 7. So the answer there is 49. So all you need to do is to follow yung theorem natin and then simplify algebraically. Then next, we have limit of quotient is the quotient of their limits. So limit of f of x over g of x is equal to limit of f of x as x approaches c all over limit of g of x as x approaches c. Of course, limit of g of x must not be equal to 0. So dapat hindi siya 0. Otherwise, magiging undefined. And also, dapat yung f of x natin must not also be equal to 0. Kung 0 din ang g of x. So, kasi nga, kapag ka naging 0 over 0, this is indeterminate. Remember, 0 over 0 is not equal to 1. Indeed, any number divided by itself is equal to 1, exception natin ang 0. So we have limit of f of x over g of x. So let's have an example. Limit of 3x minus 5 over 2x minus 2 as x approaches 5. So this will be equal to limit of 3x minus 5 as x approaches 5 all over limit of 2x minus 2 as x approaches 5. So what we will do here is to take the limit of 3x as x approaches 5 minus limit of 5 as x approaches 5. So, ginamitan lang natin siya ng sum or difference ng dalawang limits ay paghihiwalayin lang natin yung limit ng first term at saka limit ng second term and lalagay lang natin kung ano yung operation in between. Limit of 2x as x approaches 5 minus limit of 2 as x approaches 5. This therefore is equal to 3 limit of x as x approaches 5 minus limit ng constant is 5 over 2 limit of x as x approaches 5 minus 2. Then, pag in-apply natin yung theorem number 2, we have 3 multiplied by 5 minus 5. 3 times 5 minus 5 all over 2 times 5 minus 2. Oh. Isin natin yung 2. Then of course, that is 15 minus 5, 10. 10 minus 2, 8. And therefore, our answer there is 5 over 4 if we simplify this further. So 10 divided by 2 is 5 and 8 divided by 2 is 4. So let us try to have this another limit theorem. So limit of square root of f of x as x approaches c is the same as limit of f of x as x approaches c. So square root ng lahat. So ilalabas ko lang yung square root, then limit ng f of x as x approaches c. Then ikukunin ko na ngayon ang square root. So since radical is always associated with exponents, so pwede nating i-extend ito as limit of f of x as x approaches c squared or to the n, that is equal to limit of f of x as x approaches c, then tsaka ko siya i-raise sa n power. Halimbawa, if I have here limit of the square root of 7x minus 5 as x approaches 1. So, ang gagawin lang natin, ilalabas natin yung square root, then limit ng f of x natin, which is 7x minus 5 as x approaches 1. Which can be simplified to the square root of limit of 7x minus 5, 7x or limit of the first term as x approaches 1 minus limit of 5 as x approaches 1. And again, 7 is a constant, so I can put that outside. So limit of x as x approaches 1 minus limit ng constant 5 as x approaches 1. That gives us square root of 7 times 1 minus 5. Thus, the answer is square root of 2. Similarly, kapag meron tayo ritong limit of x squared plus 3x cubed minus 5x plus 1. So this is a polynomial as x approaches negative 1. So what we will do is the limit of sum is the sum of their limits. So limit ng first plus limit ng second minus limit ng third plus limit ng fourth. So try natin siya. So limit of x squared as x approaches negative 1 plus limit of 3x cubed. So lalagay ko na lang dito yung x cubed as x approaches negative 1. Then ilalagay ko dito sa labas by applying yung theorem number 3. And then since 5 is a constant, I can put that outside. Limit as x approaches negative 1 plus, of course, limit of 1 as x approaches 1. Then applying this principle, limit of x as x approaches negative 1 squared plus 3 limit of x as x approaches negative 1 cubed minus 5 times negative 1. So, diba substitute natin yung negative 1 dun sa value ng x, theorem number 2. Plus, of course, limit ng constant is 1. And that is negative 1 squared plus 3 times negative 1 cubed plus 5 plus 1. Because negative times negative is positive. So we have 1 minus 3 plus 5 plus 1. So because negative 1 times negative 1 times negative 1 is negative 1 times 3, negative 3. 1 minus 3, negative 2, plus 5 is 3, plus 1 is 4. So therefore, the answer is 4. So 4 ang ating magiging final answer. So balikan natin itong quotient. So what if I have limit of x squared minus 4x plus 4 over x squared minus x minus 2 as x approaches 2. So, kung titingnan natin, this is equivalent to limit ng x squared minus 4x plus 4 as x approaches 2. If we apply yung principle, limit x squared minus x minus 2 as x approaches 2. And then applying further, we have first term as x approaches 2 squared. Yung kapag ka mayroong exponent, i-erase lang natin yung sagot dun sa limit ng base. Minus constant c4, limit of x as x approaches 2, plus limit ng constant 4 as x approaches 2. All over limit of x as x approaches 2 squared, that is being raised to the second power, minus limit of x as x approaches 2 minus limit of 2 as x approaches 2. Simplifying this, we have, this is 2 raised to the second power minus 4 times 2 plus limit of a constant 4. And then we will have limit of x raised to the second power, that's 2 squared ulit, minus 2 minus 2. And this gives us 0 over 0. So we never leave our answer in indeterminate form. What causes this indeterminate na magkakaroon ng 0 over 0 is that meron tayong factor na hindi na-cancel out. So we can simplify this by factoring our numerator and denominator respectively and cancel out common to both. So magiging itong x minus 2 squared all over x minus 2 x plus 1. So meaning to say, kailangan muna nating tanggalin yung nagiging cause ng indeterminate for this to exist. Limit as x approaches 2 of x minus 2 for a while. Yung pen ay nagbabadya. All over x plus 1. So since na-simplify na natin because this 2 cancels out with that. So this becomes limit ni x minus limit ni 2 both x approaches 2 x approaches 2 all over limit ni x as x approaches 2 plus limit ni 1 as x approaches 2. Simplifying further, you have 2 minus 2 all over 2 plus 1. And this gives us 0 over 3. Then the limit it approach is equal to 0. So again, hindi tayo magli-leave ng final answer natin na magiging indeterminate yung answer. So dapat may makancel muna tayo kasi yun ang naging cause ng indeterminate form. So that will be all for this session.